She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She only said 5 quiet words that would change dozens of lives forever. Please, just food for my children. What happened next inside that small restaurant was cruel, humiliating, and it should have ended her hope. But fate had already started its engines outside. And the manager who raised his hand at a hungry mother never saw the bikers coming. The woman stood near the counter, holding the hand of her youngest child while the other two clung to her worn shawl. Her clothes were clean but old, carefully washed again and again to hide how little she had left. Her eyes, however, told the truth. Eyes of a mother who hadn't eaten properly in days so her children could have a few bites more. The restaurant was warm, filled with the smell of fried food and laughter from people who had never known real hunger. She waited patiently until the rush slowed, rehearsing the words in her mind so she wouldn't sound desperate. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost apologetic. Sir, if there is any leftover food, even bread, my children haven't eaten today. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. A few customers looked away, uncomfortable. Others stared as if poverty were something contagious. The manager, a well-dressed man with a sharp voice and colder eyes, stepped forward. Do you think this is a charity? He snapped loudly. People like you always come here to get free things. She lowered her head. I'm not asking for free things, she said quietly. I'll clean. I'll wash dishes. Anything. The children pressed closer to her legs, sensing danger even if they didn't understand the words. The manager's face twisted with anger, as if her dignity offended him more than her hunger. I said get out, he shouted. You're disturbing paying customers. When she didn't move immediately, only tightening her grip on her children, the manager lost control. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. A tray crashed to the floor. Gasps filled the room. Don't touch her, someone whispered, but no one stood up. The woman stumbled, shielding her children with her body as she fell to her knees. Her youngest began to cry. The sound broke something inside her. Tears finally escaped, silent and burning with shame. That's when the glass doors shook. At first, it sounded like thunder. Then came the unmistakable roar of engines, deep, powerful, and many. The restaurant windows rattled as black motorcycles rolled to a stop outside, one after another, forming a long line that stretched beyond the street. The manager froze. The crying stopped, and every head in the restaurant turned toward the door. The doors opened slowly, and the sound of engines cut off all conversation like a blade. Men and women walked in, leather jackets, heavy boots, faces marked by life, loss, and loyalty. Some had tattoos, some had gray hair, but every one of them carried the same expression, calm, controlled, and dangerous when pushed. The leader stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that had seen too much injustice to ignore another one. He looked past the manager, past the frightened customers, and focused only on the woman still kneeling on the floor, her arms wrapped around her children. Ma'am, he said gently, his voice surprisingly soft. Are you okay? She looked up, confused and terrified, unsure whether this was another nightmare. She nodded slowly, though the truth was written on her bruised arm and trembling hands. The biker's jaw tightened. He stood and turned toward the manager. Did you put your hands on her? The manager laughed nervously. She was causing trouble, begging. I was just. Before he could finish, the biker slammed his fist onto the counter, not hitting anyone, but hard enough to make the message clear. She asked for food, the biker said. You chose violence. One by one, the bikers surrounded the room, not threatening customers, not shouting, just standing there, a silent wall of accountability. Phones came out. Someone started recording. You see, the biker continued, we were once hungry kids too. Some of us slept in cars. Some of us lost mothers who couldn't ask for help anymore. He looked at the children. And we promised ourselves that if we ever saw this again, we wouldn't look away. The manager's confidence collapsed. His face went pale. I didn't mean. It's too late for meaning, the biker replied. Only actions matter now. He turned to the staff. Pack food. Enough for her children. Enough for the next few days. The staff obeyed immediately. The biker knelt in front of the children, handing them warm food. Their eyes lit up, not just with hunger, but with surprise that kindness still existed. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she whispered thank you again and again. Outside, police sirens approached, not for the bikers, but for the manager. The video had already spread. Witnesses had found their voices. As the woman prepared to leave, the biker placed some money gently in her hand. "For rent," he said, "and school supplies. Your children deserve more than survival." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to repay you." He smiled softly. "Raise them to be kind. That's enough." The bikers walked out together, engines roaring back to life, disappearing into the street like a force of justice that arrives only when humanity fails. The woman stood there, holding her children and the food, her heart finally full. And the lesson echoed long after the engines faded. Never underestimate a hungry mother. Never abuse power over the powerless. And never assume help won't come. Sometimes, it just arrives louder than you expect. That night, the woman and her children did not sleep on empty stomachs for the first time in weeks. They sat on the thin mattress in their small rented room, eating slowly, carefully, as if the food might disappear if they rushed. The children laughed softly, crumbs on their lips, asking their mother where the strong uncles on bikes had gone. She didn't know how to explain it. All she could say was, they were sent by God, or maybe by kindness itself. But when the room grew quiet and the children fell asleep, the fear returned. Her arm ached where the manager had grabbed her. Her heart pounded with questions. What if the help ends tomorrow? What if hunger comes back? Outside, rain began to fall, tapping against the broken window. She pulled the blanket tighter around her children and whispered a prayer, not for wealth, not for comfort, but for dignity, for a chance to stand without fear. Unbeknownst to her, the video from the restaurant had already crossed cities, countries, and hearts that BY morning. The internet was burning with outrage and compassion. The footage of a hungry mother being dragged, followed by the silent arrival of the bikers, spread faster than anyone expected. News channels replayed it again and again. Comment sections filled with anger, tears, and one shared question. Who is she? Donations began pouring in, small amounts from poor families, large sums from people who remembered hunger too well. The bikers group, usually private and distant from the public eye, stepped forward with one message. We didn't do this to be heroes. We did it because it was right. Authorities arrested the restaurant manager. The business shut down within days. Employees who had stayed silent that night came forward, confessing they were afraid of losing their jobs. Fear had won then, but courage was winning now. Reporters searched for the woman, but she stayed hidden. She wasn't looking for fame. She was terrified it would cost her the little piece she had left. When a local charity finally found her, she refused interviews. "I don't want people to feel sorry for me," she said. "I want people to remember kindness." The charity workers saw something else, strength. They offered her a job in their community kitchen. Not pity, respect, honest work. On her first day, she tied her hair back, washed her hands, and cried quietly as she served food to others who looked just like she had days ago. For the first time in years, she felt useful, seen. The children returned to school. Shoes donated by strangers. Bags filled with notebooks, crayons, and lunches they didn't have to hide. Teachers noticed the change immediately. The way they raised their hands, the way they smiled without fear. One day, her eldest came home and said, "Mama, I want to help hungry people when I grow up." She hugged him tightly, her heart aching and healing at the same time. At night, she no longer lay awake worrying about tomorrow's meal. Instead, she planned, budgeted, dreamed. Small dreams, but real ones. Weeks later, the roar of an engine echoed outside the community kitchen. She looked up, startled, her heart racing. One biker stepped inside, the same leader. She froze. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked nervously. He shook his head. "I came to check on you." He looked around at the busy kitchen, the smiling volunteers, the long line of people being fed. He nodded with quiet respect. "You didn't just survive," he said. "You turned pain into purpose." He handed her an envelope. Not money this time, but a certificate. A training program. A future. You earned this, he said. We just opened a door. Months passed. She completed her training. She became a supervisor at the kitchen. Her voice grew steady. Her back straightened. She no longer lowered her eyes when she spoke. Sometimes she told her story, not with anger, but with honesty. I once thought hunger made me weak, she said. But it showed me how strong love can be. People listened. People learned. In a small cell, the former manager watched the same video that had destroyed his life. Again and again. This time, there was no crowd to impress. No power to abuse. He finally understood, but too late, that strength isn't control. It's compassion. Outside those walls, the woman he tried to break was building something he never could. Years later, when her children were older, she passed that same restaurant location, now closed, abandoned. She didn't feel anger, only gratitude. She held her children's hands and said, "Never be ashamed to ask for help, and never ignore someone who does." Somewhere on the road, bikers rode on, engines loud, hearts steady, ready to answer injustice whenever it called. And the world remembered one powerful truth. Kindness can arrive quietly, or it can arrive roaring like thunder. Either way, it changes everything. Years later, when people spoke about that night, they often talked about the bikers, the sound of engines, the fear in the manager's eyes, the justice that arrived on two wheels. But the woman told the story differently. She said the real miracle wasn't the bikers. It wasn't the video. It wasn't even the food. The miracle was that, in her weakest moment, she chose dignity over anger and love over despair. She taught her children that hunger does not define a person, how they treat others does. She taught them that power is not found in shouting or striking, but in standing up when it matters most. And she taught them that help can come from the most unexpected places, but only if we keep our hearts open enough to receive it. The children grew up remembering two things clearly: their mother's trembling hands shielding them on the restaurant floor, and her steady hands serving food to others years later. When they asked her if she was afraid that night, she always answered the same way. Yes, but fear didn't stop me. Love made me brave. And somewhere in the world, every time someone chooses kindness instead of cruelty, every time a hungry child is fed, every time a stranger refuses to look away, the echo of those engines is heard again, not as a threat, but as a promise. A promise that no act of compassion is ever wasted. A promise that injustice never has the final word. And a promise that even the quietest cry for help can awaken the loudest hope.